Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode for MI for Change. I am your host, Dr. Monica Gilbert, and these podcast episodes are not just for behavior therapists and psychologists, social workers, licensed clinicians in the field, and parents, but also for anyone who wants to use these motivational interviewing skills just to become better communicators. This stuff works. There's empirical research showing that it does, and I'm going to try to make it as practical as possible so that you can apply it to every aspect of your life. And today we're going to talk about this acting technique. We're going to get into the acting of things, which is called the Meisner technique. And let me just share something with you. When you think about actors, actors train for months just to learn how to listen, how to respond, and how to stay present during their acting gigs. So, why do we assume that listening or some of these skills just come naturally to us? And don't get me wrong, for some of us, it comes very naturally. And for others, just like myself, we have to learn it. We have to practice it. And sometimes it takes a little longer. Some of these techniques can be easier than others. For example, reflections can sometimes be a little difficult, I think. And the best way to learn how to use them more effectively is to practice them. So today I want to show you this very famous acting exercise called the Meisner repetition and how it parallels to reflections and how we can use them to become better at reflecting with our clients. So funny story is that a couple years ago, I was actually acting. I acted for different type of things. I even came out in movies and TV shows and things like that. So acting was really something that I loved, and I think that a lot of those skills that I learned help me now when I go and speak in conferences, when I give lectures, when I speak with my clients. We are always performing, and people often think that when you speak about performance, you are speaking about something that is fake. And I get it. It's kind of weird thinking that someone can just embody a persona and act it out. In reality, when actors are performing, they have to be real. Imagine them playing a role and they actually have to embody that role. They have to embody those emotions, those thoughts. Like they have to embed themselves into that person. How much real does it get? And the way that they are good actors, and when you can separate good actors from bad actors, is because the real ones are truthful to that character. Like you see the character, you're like, oh my gosh, I believe it. So I think actors are the realest persons, if that is even a word, that I've ever met because of this. And there's a lot of things that we can learn from them. So yes, if you are working with clients, you are performing. We all know that we embody different people in different phases and different interactions of our lives. When you speak with your sister, it will be, or your brother, it will be different than when you speak with your significant other or with your client or with your mom or you as a mom, you as a parent. Those are different personas that we have, and we are constantly adapting them as we go along. So, that's just something I wanted to share. And of course, this idea of using the Meisner repetition exercise came from the shower. I was showering, and I think that's where the best ideas come when you well, at least for me, when I start having these monologues by myself in the shower, please tell me I'm not the only one. I start thinking about all of these different ways that I can integrate MI into everyone's daily life. And I thought about this. So, what is the Meisner exercise, the Meisner repetition exercise? So, it's actually a little funny because what you do, and this is a great way for if you're a supervisor or if you're doing these MI trainings for others, for staff, for others around you, you can have people actually do this. So you're standing in front of the other person. And the way that it works is that person A says something. So let's say person A says, you're happy, reflecting on what that person is looking like. Person B is going to look at person A and saying, I'm happy. Then person B is going to say, you're looking happier. And then person B is going to then respond and say, you look like you're curious. and so on and so forth. So, person A and person B are just reflecting back and forth. They're staying in the zone. They don't have a script. You are just reflecting back on what that person is showing. I think this is a great way to learn how to reflect. Sometimes we complicate matters more than what we should, when in reality, a reflection is simply that. You're reflecting not only on what the person is saying or what they're looking like, but also on their nonverbals, looking under that waterline. What do they mean by this action? What do they mean when their body just tensed up? What are they trying to tell me without really using their words? So that is really what the Meisner technique is. The goal isn't really the words, it's responding to shifts in emotion and tone, in body language, those micro expressions that we may sometimes miss because we're in this rush culture. It really forces us to be present and react honestly. So, this is actually, if you're listening to this, you're like, this is very similar to reflections and also responding to what's alive in the moment, which we hear a lot about in motivational interviewing. So, for those of you who may be new, who may just stumbled onto this episode, reflections are not just summaries of content, but they're really mirrors of meaning. It requires some deep listening, and you must adapt and shift to the person's tone, energy, and motivation. So we always say, don't deliver reflections like a parrot, deliver reflections like a person. You don't just want to say something over and over in a robotic way because it's going to seem like it's fake, and you don't want to come out as fake. You don't want to lose that rapport with the client. So, just like the Meisner technique, your reflections should change as the client changes, moment by moment. You're reflecting their emotion. And remember, it's like a temperature. You are going where they are going. So, some principles to the Meisner techniques, or some different tips that you can take with you. The first one is, don't plan your next line. Just like actors know that if they plan, they are dead. The best performance really comes from that genuine reaction. So, as I mentioned, actors are not liars. They are very true to their character. And therapists often plan their next session or their next question instead of listening. Sometimes we're so much in our heads and in our minds that we're just thinking about, well, what are we going to say next? What happens if I say like this? What happens if it comes out this way? So it's important to stay grounded in that spirit of motivational interviewing. Remember that spirit, that partnership, that compassion, that acceptance. Not only will it help your client during this communication, but it will also help you feel more natural and feel more at peace. And then your words are just going to come out the way that they are intended to come out if you are really keeping up with that spirit of motivational interviewing. So, the second principle of the Meisner technique and how it parallels to MI is respond to what's actually happening. So, actors are always reflecting or always focused on the raised eyebrow, the sight, the hesitation, or a change in tempo. You want to pay attention to those things. Again, these micro nonverbals are sometimes missed because we are not paying attention. Maybe you mentioned something during the session where your client raises their eyebrows, or maybe they're looking at you and then all of a sudden they look up, or maybe they look down or stop eye contact altogether, or maybe they hyper focus their eye contact. All of these things are meaningful. All of these things are telling you that there's a physiological reaction in their body, that there's a difference in the way that they are thinking that is being reflected in their nonverbals. So it's important to reflect on these. And the worst that can happen is that they tell you, well, no, that's not what I thought. Now you know that that raised eyebrow doesn't mean what you thought it meant, and that's okay. So sometimes the most powerful reflection is about what isn't said, what is being left quiet. And Another thing to point out is we have to become more comfortable staying in silence. This is another exercise that you can do as a supervisor if you're teaching others about this is do a staring contest where you're just staring not at your client. That would be a little weird, but do it as a way to teach this technique to stay in that silence. Do it with that other person and simply just stare at them in the silence. And that will tell you a lot, trust me. So, the other principle to the Meisner technique is emotional truth over intellectual truth. Obviously, we want for there to be truth, and truth is very important. But as therapists or as people that are relating to other people, we need to connect emotionally. We need to be able to read emotions. And sometimes that's accurate, sometimes that's not. It's not written on paper, it's not objectively defined, but it is something that you can become better at. In acting, for example, you don't explain the emotion. You let the emotion lead the moment. You allow it to flourish. You allow it to go wherever it has to go. In MI, we are reflecting emotion, not just behavior. We're going to name a deeper meaning of that emotion and follow the client's affect. So if you are speaking with a client and all of a sudden, and this has happened so many times, where you're talking about something with a client, and for example, a couple years ago, I was speaking with a parent that she was bringing her child to therapy, and she had gone through a divorce about a month ago. And she was just speaking about her divorce, and it was very matter of fact, like, I just got divorced with my husband, and I'm bringing my child because she has autism, she really needs therapy, and she needs the help, and she needs the help. And then I asked her, when did you get divorced? She's like, a month ago. And I'm like, oh wow, a month ago. That must be something that you're learning how to adapt to, right? And it must be perhaps a little, I don't know, a little maybe scary or a little tough? How are you doing with that? Because she was just like talking about her child and all the help, and she paused for a second, looked at me, and just began to cry in a way where she could not stop. You know, like when you start crying and just it's sort of like you open that faucet and there's no way for you to stop. And I gave her tissues, and I was just there with her. I was in the moment with her, not telling her to stop, not excusing myself for opening that can of worms, but just being present there with her because she was going through that emotion that probably didn't seem like she was able to process with anyone. Well, after the session, I recommended that she perhaps have a therapist and learn how to process and get to process these emotions that obviously it was something that was very abrupt and just happened. So she thanked me for that. She started therapy. And as we all know, since she was able to go to therapy, her child's progress was way better, way better. We saw a lot of strides with that child and that mom as well. So don't be so hesitant and don't be so quick to comfort the client and find a band-aid, which is what I feel like people do most of the time. Allow them to just share that, allow them to stay in that moment. And sometimes therapists tell me, well, it's just that I feel awkward when my clients cry. And I used to feel that way until I became comfortable with it. And I understood that first, it has nothing to do with you, and your client is not expecting you to do anything. They're not expecting you to come and hug them, because that's another thing. We get a little awkward because we're like, are they expecting a hug? Are they expecting like a tab on the back? What is it that they're expecting? Are they expecting words? Are they expecting silence? And your client will tell you. They will tell you. They will demand for what they need. Just stay there with them. Just stay there with them, and whatever it is that they need, they will let you know. So, again, staying with the emotion is important, reflecting that emotion and just kind of going with it. Here's an example. Let's say a client said something like, "I know I need to start being more consistent with routines." A basic reflection may sound something like, "You want to be more consistent. That's a basic reflection. Now, a Meisner and my reflection may sound something like there's a part of you that really wants this, and another part that looks exhausted just thinking about it. And you can kind of turn it over. I always like to end up with the talk or the phrase towards change. So you may say something like, there's a part of you that looks exhausted just thinking about it. And there's a part of you that really wants this. Do you see that the difference in that? So that is a way where we are turning boring talk into more transformational talk, which is what we want to see. We don't want to just like reflect and just drop it and leave it there. We want it to have some type of transformative power. So again, these are all Meisner slash reflection MI techniques that are merged together that you can use during your sessions with your clients or during your conversations with others. And just reiterating the way that you can turn this into an exercise is you want to pair two therapists or two people together, two participants, and then have one of them make a statement, a simple statement, and then the other one should reflect the emotion or the behind what they said, not only the content. The content is the easy one. You can give them, like some points for that for effort, but really it's on that underlining emotion, which is sometimes a little bit more difficult to do. So here's another example. I barely got here on time today. There's so much pressure on you lately, right? So you see how that's different? Let's say the client now says, yeah, I guess there is. So what this trains is presence, emotional attunement, reflection to depth, and reading those subtle cues. That's what we want to start doing, reading those subtle cues. And to close this and to just leave you all with some points and some powerful points of reflection is the best actors really don't act. They listen. The best therapists don't direct, they reflect. So whether you're on stage or in your session with the client, just remember to keep those listening ears on and to respond truthfully to human beings in front of you, to respond in a way that you would like to be responded to. Again, this sometimes takes a little bit more skills, takes a little bit more techniques. But if you're here, if you stayed until the end of this podcast, I can tell that you're interested in learning more. So if you want to learn more, you can always contact me or go to my page for all the other trainings that I do. And I hope that you are able to come to our next episode of the MI for Change. Please leave comments, let me know how it went. And of course, any questions that you have after this episode. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of MI for Change. If you're ready to keep growing your motivational interviewing skills, I'd love to invite you to explore my MI Academy, where you'll find a full library of on-demand courses designed to help you put MI into practice with confidence. You can learn more at www.drmonicagilbert.com. Until next time, keep asking the questions that spark change.